Have you ever had an opportunity, what seemed to be an opportunity just kind of fall right on your lap? An opportunity to do something amazing, something you've always wanted to do, but for one main reason, which appeared to be a maybe variety of different reasons, you just didn't take it upon yourself to act, to listen to the universe, to listen to your inner guidance and actually take this opportunity that you've always wanted to take. And you just felt a sense of like, man, all right, maybe next time I'll do it. That ultimately is a definition of self sabotage. What we're going to talk about today is understanding self sabotage and where it comes from. What is it about exactly? What is it? Because in transforming it and understanding it is the key to actually learning to not do it. We have to first acknowledge where you are first in order to understand where you're going, to leave behind the ways that are unproductive, the ways that don't align with who you truly are, toward understanding purpose and understanding who you truly are. So, with understanding this concept of self sabotage, we're talking about transforming from a state of being a child to recognizing that you are now an adult, perhaps maybe a young adult, and you have the ability, the agency, the autonomy to actually do the things that you want to do, to live the way you want to live. Rather than before, when you were a child, you essentially follow the lead, the wisdom, the understandings of your guides, right? Which can be called your guardians or even your parents, grandparents, your community. And so you have to get to a point, though, where you make that transition from being completely dependent on other people, their insight, and what they tell you to do, toward understanding that now you are completely independent and you are able to actually do what you want to do. And how not understanding the transference of power. And this allows you to actually truly become somebody who is a master at self-sabotage versus being a master at self-fulfillment, right? Or self-realization. Because when you were a child, you essentially lived on the principles of approval, wanting approval, right? Because as a child, the most important thing you seek is love. And to me, another word to describe love is acceptance, which can also be defined as approval, right? You want people to accept who you are. You want people to approve of you, being a part of their community, being a part of that family, being a extension of the love that they exude, right, and express. And so when we are talking about parents or, guardians or our guides on this earthly realm, right, in this physical plane, we are looking for them to approve of us because what they think matters to us, right? Because we love them, right? As children, we are ultimately living in this space of really being love. And so everything is beautiful, everything is positive, right? And so we are looking at our parents as gods, so to speak, right? Because they essentially give us everything that we need. And so for them to give us a sign, a clue, a recognition of how they love us and approve of all the things that we do and who we are, it's very important. It's very imperative to development. But there are times when we are being, right, when you were being your most authentic self. And what it is that, or how it is that your guides have responded to you were in a way that didn't align with being supportive of that way of being, acting, what you were doing as a child, right? So, for example, you can be a child who is very assertive and very clear about what it is that you want. But your guide, your guardian, your parent could have looked at that as being too aggressive and may have communicated to you that that wasn't okay to be who you were being, which to you at the time felt like your true self. And so, because you want their approval, you felt a sense of, oh, I'm doing something wrong, so therefore I cannot be this way. And essentially, that things like that and examples like that begin to create this state of creating a shadow self where you begin to be restrictive about who you truly are and place yourself in a box of, okay, this is who I truly am, but I cannot be that because for some reason, right, from my understanding of that exchange between myself as a child and that adult, right, that guide, that wasn't okay. So therefore, I have to dumb down, I have to pacify, I have to be restrictive of that kind of personality trait because it's not okay, right? It's not okay to that person, which means that it's not okay in the world. Then you have the world possibly reinforcing that belief system. And according to you, you see it as, okay, this isn't the way to be, right? I cannot be somebody who communicates and states what it is that's important to me and what I believe because that comes off as aggressive, okay? Or I have to be somebody who's emotionally stoic and appears to be hard because I was once called vulnerable or a crybaby when I was a kid and I was expressing my emotions. So you have to think about all these things when it comes to understanding the dynamic and the foundation of self sabotage, because it is these experiences that often will be locked in and instilled in your subconscious mind as a belief system that being this kind of way, which is who you truly are, isn't okay. And so that begins to create a domino effect of questioning that which comes natural to who you are instead of being guided in a way that acknowledges who you were and then saying, okay, this is okay to be this way. Now let's fine tune it, let's cultivate it, right? Because as a child, you see, we're at our most raw form. And all the things that we want to do as a child are also very raw, right? Anybody who knows children, who remembers being a child, who can actually observe children, they're very raw. And sometimes that comes off as children are being mean, but no, they are extremely honest, they're extremely transparent. And it doesn't mean that they have to stop being that way. In fact, that is a superpower for them. The problem is many adults who are supporting, teaching, cultivating, right? Helping them to be functional and contributors to society is telling them that that is not okay. And so they are then forced subconsciously to restrict being themselves rather than learning to polish that skill, to polish that personality trait, to learn how to be graceful and tactful about communicating that, rather than saying that all around that way of being is wrong. And so now, as we grow up, because we haven't come to an understanding that that part of who we are is, in fact, our true self, we are then led with this belief system, like we're living with this belief system that our true selves should not be acknowledged, should not be honored, should not be supported. And thus, this leads to you, right, hearing yourself, hearing your consciousness communicate to you to do this, to take this route, right? To go this direction, to be with this person, right? To move to this location. But your ego, your subconscious mind is telling you and reminding you based on the programming as a child that that isn't okay, right? It's not okay to be transparent and honest, right? Because people like, as a child, people will take advantage of you. It's not okay to be loving and supportive, right? Because that means you might get hurt, right? It's not okay to be honest because that means you're being mean. So all these different things that were given to you as a child becomes a part of your identity, right? As an adult. And when I say identity, I'm referring particularly to your false identity, your ego. So you have to understand that this all starts with seeking approval. And because you seek that approval as a child and you haven't transitioned from understanding that that approval is one that doesn't come from other people, right? Or it shouldn't come from other people as an adult, it should come from yourself. You see? So as a child, yes, you must get that approval from other people. I get that. And adults should be the ones who are wiser in guiding and supporting you to be your most authentic self, but also to cultivate polishing those skills, right? Those attributes, those characteristics in a way that allows you to be authentic as an adult. But now we have shut those things down. We have captured those things in a box. We are restricting ourselves from being authentic. And now, every time your authentic self tries to communicate with you with an opportunity, right, with a desire, with a craving, a yearning, your ego self, the subconscious self, is telling you no. It's telling you that that isn't okay. It is telling you to not be vulnerable, to not be yourself, to not be authentic, to not be honest. So you have to learn to recognize the difference between these things, the difference between having a voice, right? Having your consciousness communicate to you, and then having your ego, which is the part of you is that child self, right? And telling the child that it is okay to be yourself now. It is okay to be authentic. It is okay to be, honest. It is okay to be loving. It is okay to care. It is okay to be into art. It is okay to be into imagination, creation. It is okay to be yourself. That is what the spiritual journey is about. So when you recognize that this spiritual journey is about letting go of those false, unproductive, limited beliefs, right? That now we can let go of those and we can actually live ourselves and live and be ourselves in a way that simply aligns with your authentic consciousness. You see? So it's about recognizing true self versus the false self. Okay. Many times we are being led and we're living as a false self. And this is why life feels unreal. Life feels like it is unfulfilling. It is, you're unhappy, you're depressed, you're anxious at times. It is because you're not being authentic to who you are. And you were taught that as a child. So now you have to recognize, okay, that wasn't, productive. That wasn't good teachings. And it isn't about blaming the people who have taught you that. They did the best they could with what they had. It's not about that. It's not about blame. Okay. It's about just forgetting, forgiving, and letting go of that idea, that concept of blaming them. Because now you're an adult and now you get to take responsibility over your life. And so when we think back into self-sabotage and understanding, okay, this is about recognizing and understanding things like, cognitive dissonance. This is about understanding comfort zones and recognizing, okay, these things are symptoms and expressions of that. Cognitive dissonance is really about seeing that your actions don't align with what you want. Okay. And because your actions are based on what you think you're supposed to do, what you were told to do as a child, right? You were told to get a 9 to 5 job. You were told to get a house with a white picket fence. You was told to, find a good person, marry, have such and such kids. You were told to have a dog, right? You were told these basic things. Those are all examples of just symbolic patterns that we were taught and told that was what we are supposed to do. But you are a unique and beautiful individual who gets to decide and do whatever it is that you want in alignment with your consciousness. So you can break down those, terrible and limiting beliefs and be your most authentic self and be the self that says, well, you know what? I want to travel the world. I want to be a nomad. Or I want to live in a tiny house. Or I just want to live in an apartment rather than own this big old house that I have to take care of. Or I want to live in a big house instead of being in a small apartment, right? It is all up to you. You define that, but you have to be clear and understand that you don't have to fit into this box that you were taught to live in. Okay? It doesn't even have to be a box. All right? It can be a triangle, it can be a pyramid, it can be a rectangle, it can be a flower, right? It can be anything you wish. You decide. But you have to learn to recognize that this all started with approval. So even now, as you do things, you have to ask yourself, am I doing this because I am seeking approval from others? Am I doing this because I want to make an impression upon others? You see, because it is that desire for approval proves that you're still living in your childlike state, that your maturity level is still that of a child. And you haven't developed to recognize that it isn't the approval of others that's important. All right. It is the approval from yourself that is important. You see, we live in this world where we think that the outside world is what dictates our happiness and fulfillment. But when you look at nature, right? Nature is a very important teacher of the spiritual journey. When you observe nature and you observe growth, expansion, right? Blossoming. Because that's what this is a lot. This is about. This is about growing into yourself. This is about blossoming into your true self and essence. Everything starts from the inside. It grows outward, right? The seed begins to grow from the inside out. Every fruit, everything, it grows from the inside out. The tree, it grows from the inside out, right? Nothing grows from the outside in. So when you think about approval, the approval happens truly from the inside out. It starts within you. You must approve of yourself first. Then the blossoming happens where you begin to blossom, bloom, right? You begin to flower and open up, and the beauty radiates for everybody else to experience and witness. And that witness is with the intention of inspiring them to recognize that beauty within themselves. So your job is really to let go of this childlike self seeking approval of others, recognizing, okay, you can communicate with that child self. You can let it know that it is accepted for who it is. So that way you can feel accepted for who you are. This is about having a conversation with yourself, right? Your child self, and thus that transferring into your adult self, your current self. So you must recognize, you must heal the child in order to heal the adult. Again, starting within, starting with that first seed as a child, and thus that begins to blossom into a beautiful flower or rose. So you must recognize the importance of this skill set, and just even conceptually recognizing that the only important thing, the only important opinion, the only important thought, the only important concept of approval and acceptance and love at this point in your life comes from you. It comes from you. When it comes from you and from an authentic place of an understanding that you are divine, right? And you are an expression of the universe. You are the universe living as you. Then you recognize that there really isn't others, right? There is only you. But it starts within you, and then that realization spreads outward. That's the direction of this spiritual realization. So you recognize and you can then identify things like overthinking, right? Procrastination, perfection, right? Avoidance. This is because those things are rooted in the approval of from others. Okay, you want things to be perfect, so that way when people see it, they think you are perfect, right? But it's coming from a false reality. It's coming from the ego sense of perfection. But that kind of perfection, just like the ego, it isn't real. It is false, right? Overthinking is the same thing. You're constantly trying to figure out the most perfect situation, the most perfect way. Avoidance means you just simply are not thinking that you are capable of dealing with it, so you don't deal with it. You have to understand that you are a perfect being. You are complete and you are whole as you are. So recognize that when you are thinking about perfection, it's simply about recognizing that all that you do is perfect. Now, your concept of perfection and all that you do can develop, can change, can shift over the course of time, because you will shift over the course of time. You will connect deeper with your purest true self. And so everything that you do, though was perfect 5 years ago, may have a different appearance of perfection today, right? A different expression of perfection today, right? It could be the same thing that you did, but just like anything, The more you do something, the better at it you get. But really, it's just simply about changing the way perfection looks. The expression of perfection will change and evolve as you change and evolve into your true self. So, perfection is an illusion of something being right and something that can never get better, that can never change. We know change is inevitable, change happens with everything. The only thing that doesn't change is change itself. So you have to recognize this idea of perfection is something that we often associate with something that can't be changed, but it changes just as you change. The important thing is to recognize that this all starts with approval. The sooner you approve of yourself, who you are, down to the core, then you begin to make a shift and stop the self sabotage. Thank you so much. Feel free to go to drabundant.com, subscribe to my daily newsletter, and get access to this free ebook and so much more. Continue to join me on this journey. Peace and abundance always.